Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the government not appointing a High Court judge in Jammu and Kashmir despite repeated recommendations from the Supreme Court Collegium. We will also talk about why fuel prices have been skyrocketing. But first, we talk about the Prime Minister's new action plan. 1 month ago, on September 18, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with secretaries of all departments and ministries. It was a marathon meeting, and after it was over, the central government prepared a comprehensive 60-point action plan. A plan that contains suggestions for improving business and governance in India. The documents of this action plan were accessed by Indian Express's Anisha Datta, and she joins us now to talk about it. So, Anisha, PM Modi had this marathon meeting on September 18, and out of this meeting, a 60-point action plan came out. Before we discuss this action plan, could you talk about the significance of this meeting?
So, the Prime Minister holds these periodical interactions every month on a portal called Pragati, which was launched in 2015. Here, the Prime Minister has these regular interactions for monitoring and reviewing important central government programs as well as state government programs with all top government officials. So, that's a regular thing. The significance of the September 18th meeting was that, this was the first major physical interaction also that the Prime Minister had directly with all top government secretaries across ministries and departments. And there was a direct push for big reforms across the ministries, right? So we've mentioned that there were three key areas of focus, leveraging IT and technology infrastructure for governance. The second was improving business climate and an ease of doing business. And third was multiple suggestions on upgrading the civil services with a key focus on sectoral specialization.
Okay, so let's talk about these three broad areas that the center basically wants to focus on, starting with business. What does the action plan say about how the government wants to improve business in the country?
So the action points actually start with the ease of doing business. They have laid out 4 to 5 pointers for the Department of Trade. So it starts off with examining whether certain permissions can be done away with altogether to improve ease of doing business in India. The second point that is mentioned is the government says that the cost of setting up a business in India compared to other countries in the region like Vietnam, Indonesia is much higher. So what they have mentioned is that we should take up 10 sectors at a time to review cost of starting a business in India. The government has also made a point to increase interactions that ministries hold with the industry bodies. And the Prime Minister has said that there should be more regular interaction that the Department of Trade needs to hold with industry bodies at a regular basis. And one of the key recommendations also mentioned a national monitoring platform for startups to be set up. So here the government has recommended that mentors could be a single point of contact for startups and entrepreneurs, and they may also support in organizing initial funding. So again, this is a key suggestion made for the Department of Trade. This also was part of the ease of doing business action points.
Right. And when we talk about improving business, the other thing that your piece mentions is timely land acquisitions, forest clearances, and the drafting of a single Environment Act. Could you talk about what the action plan says in regards to this?
Right. The biggest takeaway from that was the recommendation of bringing all environmental sector laws under one ambit, right? So the document mentions that the acts may be replaced by a comprehensive Environment Management Act. Now, again, they mentioned that multiple permissions from multiple agencies are required before work starts. What they want is a simplification of the process by providing automatic notifications for clearances required and documents to be provided when a unit registers. And another key recommendation was one of the points mentioned by the government was land acquisition and forest clearance issues are very difficult to resolve in certain state governments. So, what the government has suggested is a ranking framework for states for the processes of giving clearances. And they've recommended that some incentives may be given to the states for providing timely clearances. This is again a push for expediting land clearances, land acquisition process for all big infrastructure projects. Also, the government talks about digitizing land records. So, we knew about the land database portal that central government had launched called Matrubhumi. Here, they've mentioned that each parcel of land will have a unique ID for ease of tracking and transactions. So, this could also help in integrations with the e-code systems, and it will provide more transparency in title possession and other related issues. So these are the broad points mentioned for the land acquisition, land clearances, and environmental clearances that the government wants to focus on.
Right, and this is all basically under the government's aim to improve the way business is done in the country. And that was one broad focus of this entire action plan. The other was the leveraging of IT and technology to improve governance. What does the action plan say about that?
So, yes, one of the key points that the government mentions is that they want to make all government data accessible across all ministries and departments. So, sort of a single database which every government and ministry can access. That is one. But the biggest here is they've talked about developing standards for new technologies like 5G. What they mentioned for the Department of Telecommunication is that they need to prepare global standards and then push these Indian standards at a global level. Also, our story talks about government's plan of bringing an optical fiber network across households, which is one of the areas which they have mentioned as the next big project that the government should be focusing on. And the document also mentions the digital divide for poor students. And they mention the need to address this. They've also mentioned the need for remedial coaching through volunteerism that could be explored in these sections. Again, what the government has asked the IT ministry to focus on bringing in more digital platforms like the GSTN network and the Ayushman Bharat network. What they've said is that, we need to develop more digital platforms for other sectors as well.
Okay, so you talked about the way the government plans to do business in the country, the way it plans to leverage information technology. Now, the third area of focus is administrative reform. What changes has the government suggested in that area?
Right. So, in that aspect, the government has been focusing on bringing in sectoral specialization within the civil services. One of the key recommendations, action point mentioned for the Department of Personnel and Training is training state and central government officers in various aspects of infrastructure sector. And they've also said that expertise needs to be developed for officers having more sectoral roles. So what they've suggested is junior level officers in central government ministries should come from sectoral verticals. So again, what we see is an active push for bringing in specialization in central government departments. If you look at the reforms suggested for the unification of the cadres of the railway ministry as well, there also, the central government had mentioned that there is an active push that they wanted to make in bringing in specialization in the cadres. So what I see here is in these administrative suggestions mentioned by the government is again an active push in the same direction where we focus on sectoral specializations across the civil services.
Okay, so through this plan, we are seeing that the government is centralizing policy level decision making and then going further ahead with plans for, say, 5G and enhancing optical fiber network. Now, one other thing that the action plan mentions is that there is no proof of citizenship in India. Citizenship may be linked to birth certificates through technology and mainstreamed. Could you talk about the significance of this particular statement?
Right. This also we can see it in the backdrop of this NRC CA Act that the government wanted to bring in. Now, the Home Ministry in 2019 had clarified that the citizenship of India may be proved by giving any document relating to the birth of a person or a document that mentions the place of the birth or both. So it was clarified that birth certificates would be considered as citizenship proof. Here, the government is mentioning about leveraging technology for that. So we could see a central database of sorts being created that links birth certificates to the citizenship of a person. But again, there is no clarity of how that is going to be implemented, what the government is actually planning to take it forward, how technology will be integrated to carry this plan forward. As you know, we're also aware that about 30% Indian citizens do not have access to their birth certificates. So, like I said, we still don't have any clarity how the government is planning to go about it. So, we'll just have to wait and watch what the Home Ministry is planning in this aspect.
And next, we talk about the judiciary. 6 months back, the Supreme Court Collegium, which is responsible for identifying judges for the positions in high courts and the Supreme Court, made a recommendation to the government. The recommendation was to appoint a judge to the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. And this was actually the third time that the Collegium was making this recommendation. But the government still hasn't acted on it. The person that was recommended for the position was Advocate Sadiq Wasim Nagral. In this segment, Apurva Vishwanath, who reports on law for the Indian Express and who broke this story, joins us to talk about it. Apurva, you have reported that thrice the Supreme Court Collegium has made recommendation to the government for the appointment of Sadiq Wasim Nagral as a judge in the Jammu and Kashmir High Court, but the government still hasn't acted on it. But before we talk about this recommendation, could you first explain how things are usually supposed to work after the Supreme Court makes the recommendation for the appointment of a judge?
So once the Supreme Court Collegium, which is headed by the Chief Justice of India, makes a recommendation to the government to appoint a particular person as a judge of the High Court, the government either appoints that person or can seek certain clarifications or send the file back to the Supreme Court Collegium if the government has certain red flags on the particular person. So it could be because there are questions raised in the IB report. It could be because some other reason that the government has. So when the file comes back, the collegium reassesses the candidate once again. And if it still thinks that the person should be appointed, then the collegium reiterates its recommendation. And once the reiteration is made, conventionally, the government is bound to make that appointment.
Right, and even though it is bound, the government in this case has not done so. It has not appointed Nagral as a judge. So on what grounds can the government hold off on appointing a judge?
So in the case of Nagral, we don't really know what objections that the government had raised in this case. And many of these conversations between the government and the collegium happen in a completely opaque platform. So all we would know in the public domain is that the government is dragging its feet on appointing a particular person. And many a times the collegium has itself said that the government doesn't provide adequate reasons for when it is red flagging a particular candidature. So the collegium has, in previous instances, not in this case, but in other cases, written to the government asking for specific reasons for objecting a particular candidature. So these conversations happen in completely opaque platforms, and we more often than not don't know why there is a delay in the process.
And this is something that we have seen the government do previously as well, right? So could you talk about some of these examples that we have seen in the recent past?
So since 2017, the process of appointing these judges, at least who the collegium is recommending, has been put in public domain. So before that, we really don't know if there was this exchange between the collegium and the government where a name had to be reiterated multiple times. But since 2017, for the first time now, you see a lot of names where the collegium has had to reiterate it for the second time. And in two cases, like Wasim Nagral and a Karnataka advocate, Ramchandra Nayak, the collegium has actually recommended the person thrice. And there is a pattern to this. It's either lawyers who have worked for governments in the opposition earlier. Like, for example, in Karnataka, both the advocates whose name has been recommended multiple times, Aditya Sondhi and Nayak, as I mentioned before, have held briefs with the state government, Congress-ruled state government in Karnataka. And it's the same case with even Calcutta High Court, where the advocates whose names have been reiterated by the Supreme Court Collegium, Sakya Sen, Lipika Banerjee, all of these advocates have held briefs with the state government, which is an opposition party. And if you look at the case of Jammu and Kashmir in particular, there is senior advocate Moksha Khajuria Kazmi, where her candidature has been pending for a couple of years now. So there is a pattern to this. And for the first time now, you have at least 12 cases where after multiple recommendations, the government is yet to appoint these advocates as judges.
And Apurva, what are the implications of doing this, of, the government holding back on the appointments of senior judges?
So the Memorandum of Procedure, which is essentially the document that guides the process of appointing judges, does not come from a statute or does not come from the Constitution itself. This process that the Indian judiciary has evolved since 1998, 1993 is this unique collegium system of appointing judges. Now, which is a departure from the text of the Constitution itself. So this Memorandum of Procedure is respected or has sanctity only till both parties play by the book. So if the government decides to say that I will not follow the Memorandum of Procedure, then it really puts the judiciary on a back foot, because it will be forced to defend the process that the judiciary has evolved over the years. So the second judges and the third judges cases from in 1993 and then again in 1998, these two landmark rulings have sort of set the standards and the process of judicial appointments. In fact, in the NJC ruling also, the court had said that the collegium system of appointing judges is the only way to ensure an independent judiciary. So if the government decides to not abide by the Memorandum of Procedure or just drag its feet, raising questions of whether the MOP has still got the same sanctity or not, these issues will impact what an independent judiciary as we understand today.
Okay, so according to the Memorandum of Procedures, the government is supposed to make the appointment after the recommendation has been made twice. Here it has been made thrice and yet there has been no action. So what happens in this case? Is there a way to sort of hold the government accountable for this?
There are no set timelines in the Memorandum of Procedure for the government to accept a recommendation after these multiple reiterations. But of course, 6 months is a reasonably good time, and anything beyond that is something that raises questions. But what happens next if the government doesn't appoint is something that the judiciary will have to now decide. So essentially, some former judges of the Supreme Court, for example, Justice Madan Lokur has said that the judiciary should act in whichever way. Like, for example, take up the case on the judicial side, ask the government to file an affidavit, or in the same process that is already existing, that is the collegium way, for the Chief Justice to write to the government and understand what are the reasons for the delay. So all of these are any activities that have to be done are to be led by the judiciary now.
And in the end, we talk about fuel prices. For a while now, fuel prices have been on the rise. Last week, several news stories pointed out that petrol and diesel prices in India are now more expensive than jet fuel. So what is the reason for this rise? In this segment, Indian Express's Karunjit Singh joins us to explain this. Karunjit, before we talk about the reasons that fuel prices have just skyrocketed, could you talk about what the current fuel prices are and how much have they increased?
So you're absolutely right. The prices have increased a lot, and we've actually noticed quite a big hike over the past 3 weeks. So the price of petrol in Delhi right now is 105.8 rupees per litre, and the price of diesel is 94.6 rupees per litre. And I mean, the increase of the past 3 weeks has been quite significant. 4.5 rupees in the case of petrol and 5.75 rupees in the case of diesel, just in this same period. The key immediate reason we're seeing behind this increase is a sharp rise in global crude prices. And this has been quite a steady increase over a sustained period. What we've seen is a year ago, crude oil prices were about $42.5 a barrel. And today they've nearly doubled to $85 per barrel. And this is the highest level that we've seen since 2018. This is even higher than what we saw pre-pandemic. So just for reference, in January 2020, the price of crude oil was about $68 per barrel.
And how much of this has got to do with the supply of crude oil from OPEC and the oil producing countries?
So the supply of crude oil has been a key reason behind the increase in crude oil prices. What we saw in April 2020 was, with the pandemic related restrictions, the demand for crude oil fell dramatically, and the price of crude oil therefore came down to even $20 per barrel. And oil producing countries decided at that point of time to cut production by 10 million barrels per day to shore up crude oil prices. Now, over time, as the prices rose, they did reduce the production cuts. But even today, the production levels are about 4.5 million barrels per day lower than the reference levels. So what we're seeing is a supply shortage basically in the market. And it's not something that OPEC is willing to address very quickly. Even with another 400,000 barrels per day of production addition, which they're planning in November, there will still be a basic shortage of supply in the global market. And this has caught the eye of a number of countries which are facing high prices like India. And they have reached out to OPEC and other oil producing countries to increase levels of production. In fact, we've learned from the oil ministry that our petroleum minister Hardeep Singh Puri has been in touch with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, US and Russia about increasing crude oil supplies to bring down prices.
Okay, so the price and supply of crude oil is one thing, but the other thing is that the government, particularly in India, just imposes a lot of tax on fuel. How much of the problem has got to do with that?
So while the immediate rise in prices that we're seeing is not due to taxes, there is a clear issue with us being at a situation of elevated taxes, because in 2020, when the economy basically came to a halt because of the pandemic, the government increased the central levies on petrol by rupees 13 a litre and on diesel by rupees 16 per litre. So even now, despite the hike in crude oil prices and them accounting for a larger portion of the price of petrol and diesel, just taxes, both central and state, account for about 54% of the price of petrol and 48% of the price of diesel in Delhi. So it is a key component behind the higher prices. And we've learned that the petroleum ministry has actually been speaking with the finance ministry internally to try and bring these rates down. But what we've learned from the finance ministry is that the impact that these higher prices have on inflation is not particularly concerning for them. And they believe that the programs that the government can fund through the taxes collected on fuel, including the vaccination program and the program offering free food to the poor, the Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, are just more important to the government right now than bringing down the inflation component that is being brought up by the price of fuels.
You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.